Christians don't know the Bible. And I don't say that to throw shots at Christians that I know, Christians whom I love, Christians whom I have respect for. That is not to throw a shot at you guys at all. When I say Christians don't know the Bible, here's what I mean by that. I believe that Christians don't know the Bible because after researching where the religion Christianity comes from, you will come to the conclusion that today's Christians believe in heathen, Gentile perspective of the Bible. Let me say that again. Today's Christians believe Gentiles and heathens, strangers, non-Israelites, because the Bible is about the Israelites. So Christians today believe in non-Israelites' perspective of the Bible. Y'all don't believe in the Bible itself. That's why Christians disregard the Old Testament. That's why Christians have no respect for the Old Testament. They only utilize it when it comes to creating a sermon, some type of message that you want to teach this particular Sunday. But you don't read and study the Old Testament for what it is and for what it's saying and for it. And as y'all don't read and study it, y'all, what I'm really want to say is y'all don't approach the Old Testament as if it's real historical events, as if y'all don't approach it with respect, y'all don't approach it with honor, y'all approach it with disregard. You only utilize it when you see fit for your doctrine, for what you want to teach. For example, y'all remember the song by Fred Hammond? We're blessed in the spirit, we're blessed in the field. Or I probably butchered it. We're blessed when we come and when we go in and out. It was a slapper back in the day. I fucked with it back in the day. Tough. I fucked with it. But here's an example of how Christians utilize the Old Testament versus actually believing it. That song is based on Deuteronomy 28, the first verse. We're blessed in the city, blessed in the field. That's Deuteronomy. That's talking about the blessings that God would bestow upon Israel if they would keep his commandments and do his words. But is that song predicated around that? No. Listen to the song. It's all about just being blessed, prosperity, having good things. You know, late in the midnight hour, God's going to turn it around. Like, it's all about just prosperity, God making things happy for you, which is deeper than that. That's part of it, but it's much deeper than that, because that song is predicated on Deuteronomy 28 about when God said, if you keep these commandments and hearken to my voice, all these blessings will come upon you. And once you read Deuteronomy 28 verses 1 through 16, the Most High is laying out all the blessings. Blessed in the city, blessed in the field. That was part of the blessings that God was speaking into Israel. You see how that verse has everything to do with Israel and their blessings versus what Fred Hammond was talking about in that song? That's a clear-cut example right there. So you disregard the Old Testament. You don't honor the children of Israel. You approach the children of Israel, whether you think they're the Jewish people over there in the land, because most people in the world think it's them. But even if that's the case, y'all don't even honor the children of Israel. Y'all don't even approach the children of Israel as if they are the writers of the book that you claim you believe in. They are the people that God chose to spread his word throughout the four corners of the earth. Psalms 147, 19 and 20. He said, he showed his word unto Israel, his judgment and his statutes unto Jacob. He has not dealt so with any other nation. He hasn't dealt with any nation. You can look this up historically. Other nations was never dealing with the God of the Bible. All these other nations, the Chinese, the white folks, so-called Hamites, authentic Africans, East Indians, all these other nations have their own God. Once you analyze the history of these nations, they all have their own particular gods. So in Psalms, when God said, I have not dealt so with any nation, he meant that. He was not dealing with the Greeks. He wasn't dealing with the Edomites. He wasn't dealing with the Jebusites. He wasn't dealing with the Canaanites. He wasn't dealing with the Persians. Like God wasn't in covenant with none of these nations. And you can look this up biblically and historically. So once you understand the historical origins of the Bible, of who God is truly dealing with, because he vocalized it throughout the whole Torah and prophets, it's clear that he's dealing with one nation. But since other nations don't like that, they came 300 years after Christ, many years after Christ, and formulated their own paganistic religion called Christianity. And they brought in all of their pagan rituals, all of their pagan deities, Zeus, Ra, Athena, Ishtar, all these pagan gods they brought in and mixed and mingled it with the Hebrew influence and created Christianity. Now they're saying that the laws of God are done away with. Now they're saying that everybody is grafted in. Now they're saying that God sent his only son to die for all nations. They quote Paul's letters. They go to the end of the Bible, only quoting Paul's letters. Y'all do know that Paul's letters is only like 4 or 5% of the whole Bible. It's a very small portion of the Bible at the end of the book, by the way. So they skip to that part in the book, the very end of the book, into a very small percentage at the end of the book, taking these vague sayings that Paul is writing to Israelites in different areas around Jerusalem. In that area, these are letters sent to them. Once you read the beginning of each letter, you can see that. But they take these vague verses and they try to utilize it to make it seem like God is talking about everybody, when that is not the case. Paul himself said in Acts 24:14, he said, I believe in all things in the law and the prophets. Paul believed the prophets. Paul believed Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Obadiah, Zechariah, Zephaniah. You feel me? All these prophets, Paul believed in that stuff. Paul wrote in Romans 9:4 that he wrote that salvation, the gospel, the law, all of that pertains to Israel. He wrote all this stuff. Paul was not contradicting himself when he wrote the things that he wrote in his letters. But Peter already gave the disclaimer that in Paul's letters is going to be some things that is going to be hard to be understood. And those who wrestle with the scriptures and avoid the Old Testament, avoid everything that was written before Paul, they look at these scriptures and try to, and they create a complete false doctrine out of these misinterpretations in Paul's letters. So overall, my conclusion, what I'm saying, Christianity is a religion based off the interpretation and perspective of a non-Israelite, of non-Israelites. Look up the early church fathers. These were Romans and Greeks, and they came in hundreds of years after Christ's death, resurrection, and they gave their spin on the scriptures. They totally disregarded the Torah. They totally disregarded God's people. They said that Jews don't have no understanding and that God is dealing with the spiritual Israel now, and the word is given to Christians. These were the thinking points and the talking points from these early church fathers. And around that time, that's when Constantine formulated Christian. That's all of these teachings come from Rome, Roman Catholicism. All this God loves everybody, Roman Catholicism. The Gentiles can be saved, other nations can be saved. That's Roman Catholicism. I butchered it a couple times. That's Roman Catholicism. The virgin birth, Roman Catholicism. Jesus is white, the Israelites is white. That's Roman Catholicism. Christians, you don't believe in the Bible because you follow the same methodology of understanding the Bible as the early church fathers, i.e. Gentiles and heathens. You follow their method of understanding the Bible. That's why you say the Old Testament is done away with. That's why you don't regard the prophets in the Torah. That's why you only stay in Paul's letters, which is an extreme small percentage of the book at the end of the book. You disregard the first 80% of the book and you skip all the way to the end, claiming you have the understanding of what the Bible is saying. You've been taught by heathens. You've been taught by Gentiles. The only ones that understand this Bible is God's chosen people, who are the Israelites. That's why I'm going to quote one more time Psalms 147, 19 and 20. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said, he showeth his word unto Jacob, his judgments and his statutes unto Israel. He has not dealt so with any nation. They don't know God's judgment. They don't know God. The Greeks didn't know God. The Persians didn't know God. The Canaanites don't know God. White people don't know God. The Asians don't know God. These nations, the East Indians, they don't know God. They know their own deities, their own gods. You can analyze the history of all these nations and see what type of deity that they were dealing with. And it was not the God of the Bible. It was not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Wake up, my Christian brothers and sisters. Wake up. Come back home. God loves you. God chose Israel to be a special people. He sent his only begotten son to those people. That's why Hamashiach said, he said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And with that, I yield. Shalom, family. Love you.